week passing.
And
What's that? That's not the new. And then hey,
okay, so it was open as well. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I think last week's parasha Shlach Lecha was about crying over spilled milk. A week late. We're a week late. Thank you for Stephen for inviting me. There's quite a bit to go through, but I'm trying to sort of approach them for those who are watching either at home or who will watch later. So Korach is, I mean, the whole of Bamidbar needs. You really should spend a year just learning the parashiot of Bamidbar. I heard a colleague of mine who gave a talk got up and said, "Not much happens in Birnbaum." And I was sitting, I try not to heckle colleagues when they're speaking, but I thought this is the most action-packed in terms of its relevance to us in probably the whole. This is almost like an introduction both to Hashem and to our heritage, our forefathers and mothers, and then Shemos, really. I know Shemos, the action of Shemos is what we call top down. It's very much Hashem centric, and we're kind of passively playing our role in the whole thing. And then you get to Vayikra, which is more the rules and abstractions of the Torah, and you get to Bamidbar, and suddenly human beings are front and center every single week. And probably as a result of that, everything that can go wrong does go wrong. And that really, the middle of Bahala, that son. Korach. Korach is a very, very peculiar and fascinating story. And I'd like to draw our attention. It's in Perek Tes Zayin, 16th chapter, where we read a very strange, if I may say, tefillah. So the confrontation has happened. Korach and his followers have laid down the gauntlet. Moshe and Aaron, they're challenging their leadership, and they're saying, you in an act of nepotism, you took the leadership, you gave the high priest the we left us with nothing. And really, Korach says, by order of seniority in the him, I should have got something. Now, it's not clear if he wants to be the Kohen Gadol or if he wants to replace Moshe. Either way, that's his challenge. Now, we know Moshe's response, having tried to make peace and tried to, bring some sort of conclusion to the situation. I'm sure, like me, you're fascinated by the way we conduct politics in the modern world, where foreign policy is just posted on social media for everyone to see and trumped up and Twitter and stuff. And it's just a fascinating thing to see. But Moshe tried the diplomatic route; it doesn't work. And then he turns to Hashem and he offers the following tefillah. He says, "Bazos teidun, ki Hashem shlochani." Through this, you will know that Hashem sent me on this mission. La is to do everything that you've seen. I've not fabricated anything my own heart. Everything I do, says Moshe, is as an emissary of the Almighty. And this is how you know it. These rebels, if they die a natural death, like the death of any person, and the end, the reckoning of every person is brought upon them as their reckoning, then lo Hashem shlachani. Then you'll know that Hashem didn't send me. That's how you'll know. However, the imbriya yivra Hashem, if Hashem will create a creation, and the earth will open up its mouth, uvala osam, and swallow them up, and all that belongs to them. The Yordu Chaim Sha'ola, and they'll descend to the netherworld alive. Vidatem, then you will know. That really what these people are trying to do is not challenge my leadership, but Niyatsu es Hashem. They're rebelling, not against me, but against Hashem. That's how you'll know. So this is the litmus test that Moshe constructs. Now, any questions on? I think we're probably all very familiar with this. Probably from the age of about 6 or 7, whenever we first encounter it. I I've never done this before. I'll make it more, turn it over to the audience. But request, especially considering who says it and what we know about Moshe as a demanding a miracle. That seems a little bit peculiar. We know we've seen before, for example, we've seen before the split of the Red Sea, that he seems to be confused as to what to do. He doesn't stand there saying, please, Hashem, he says, please, Hashem. Now all of a sudden demanding a miracle. Although we may push back on that because it doesn't say miracle, does it? What does it say? Riyah. It's strange as well that Moshe, who spends most of Bamidbar begging on our behalf, suddenly switches to quite a harsh way of speaking, where he's asking not just for justice and punishment. Forgive me for saying it, quite graphic, isn't it? It's quite a very, very specific request of how they should meet their comeuppance. Very. That's another question. The main question to ask is, what does the word Bria mean? The second word in the whole Baruch bara Elokim. Okay, good. There are other verbs that are used in the creation narrative in the beginning of Bereshis. Bria is the one that means made. Vayitzer is another one that means formed. And there are others as well that we read. So what do you mean about Bria as a verb? What type of creation is it? Yes. So the way that the Mefarshim, the way Chazal, Hashem created what's called in Hebrew Havayat Yesh Me'ayin, or Ex Nihilo, which means creating there was nothing. And that's nothing in the scientific sense of the word. Nothing. There was nothing there. And so what's peculiar then is Moshe doesn't say, please perform a miracle. He doesn't say, Ya'as Hashem Nes, may Hashem perform a miracle. He says, Im Bria Yivra Hashem. If Hashem will create something from nothing. Now, the Ibn Ezra, really his question, I think, is already in the and Darim. The Ibn Ezra draws our attention to a slight problem with this. Was Korach's punishment something from nothing? Brand new. Never been seen before. Why not? Possibly in Sodom and Amorah did that. So the Ibn Ezra says it very simply. The Ibn Ezra says he was more like one of the rationalists in his approach to the Torah. He says, what are you talking about? There's earthquakes the whole time. It's a natural occurrence. You know, one we celebrate. You know, and he's writing this in the medieval era. It was well known to them at that I mean, if you live in this country, you wouldn't know, but there are earthquakes. So, what exactly is so new and spectacular about what Moshe is asking for? The second question, which I remind us of, is why Moshe asking for this very specific mode of punishment. There's a double clause here. Clause one is if they die a natural death, Hashem didn't. You can finish there. If they die an unnatural death, then you know Hashem has sent me. Quite possibly. Yeah, it could be. It's a very nice, I haven't heard that before. It's a very nice idea. It could be a midah keneged midah. He's asking for this specific punishment. And before things start to get better, let's make it a bit worse. We're learning at the moment on Shabbos afternoon. In Stanmore, I recently made a takana, an enactment, which was the instead of doing a half Shabbos minute, we just take one Mishnah at a time, and we spend in it like equal amount of time just looking at that one. So we're way behind Edgeware now. We're still in the first chapter. You guys, in fact, I don't even know what we're on Mishnah 10 in chapter 1. But in chapter 5, which you've all seen already by now, says as follows: Asara Devarim Nivru Be'erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashos. There were 10 things created on the very first Friday. Twilight, we'd call it twilight. Ve'eluhein, these are they. You don't have to read any further than the first one. The first one is mouth of the land, then there's the mouth of the donkey, etc. Miriam's well, and it goes on. The manna, the matter, the staff, the shamir, the special worm that was used in the Beis Hamikdash. Good, but we only need number one on the list of 10. Number one on the list of 10 is what was created on the first Friday during twilight? Pi haaretz. So what's the question? If Moshe is asking for a new creation to come into existence that has never existed before. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, not only was it there, how long has it been there for? It's been there since the very beginning. Since the beginning. So on earth, no pun intended, what under earth, what is Moshe asking for? What is he asking? It's not even why this specific, why is he framing it as if it's this brand new creation that no one's ever seen before? Says the Ibn Ezra, we see earthquakes the whole time. And says the Mishnah in Birnbaum, it's been there since. Two questions. There are a number of approaches to these questions. And I'd like to share with you one that brings them together and answers them both simultaneously. A few answers to the second. The second question is why Moshe wants this specific punishment for them. And the first question is Yesh Me'ayin, the ex nihilo, what's the new creation that we're talking about? There are a number of approaches. Some say, for example, the earthquake that Moshe is referring to, it's as we've said in the pasuk that they descend alive. V'yardu chayim sha'ola. They descend alive. You may be familiar with a number of Mizmorei Tehillim, Psalms in Tehillim, that the Midrash says of them that were composed. We are told in the Midrash that the sons of Korach composed them under the earth, underground. And if you inclined your ear, you'd be able to hear them davening and praying, as it were, and composing Tehillim. But we're not in Kansas anymore when we mention such things. So that's one approach. That's one approach. The Ibn Ezra is so bothered by his own question that we see earthquakes the whole time that he says uniquely, it's very unlike him to say this. He's one of the strongest out there as a linguist and a grammarian, I think is the word. And he very rarely allows a word to depart from its literal translation. And yet here, because of his question, that we see earthquakes the whole time, he says you cannot translate the word Bria as a, you have to translate it totally differently. And he uses an obscure reference elsewhere in Tanakh to translate it as splitting. It's an idea of one thing being cut from another. And he says it's not really asking for something new at all. That's the Ibn Ezra's approach. There are a number of other approaches. The way the Gemara deals with this question, it seems, at least based on how Rashi understands it, and we can do a bit of Jewish geography now, literally Jewish geography, is the Gemara understands it. What Moshe Rabbeinu is asking for is the mouth of something called Gehinnom, which is, I know it's too early in the morning to speak about such things, and the Gemara says, Moshe is asking for is, I mean, would we say that Gehinnom has a physical location? It's simplistic. So in our heads that hell has some sort of location. So what's the valley of Gehinnom? That's the Sil Azazel. So that would have been the northernmost point of the Dead Sea nowadays, corresponding to that. The Valley of the Dry Bones is in Yechezkel on the way out of Mitzrayim from Egypt. So there's a third place, which I'm sure you've been to, the Mamilla Mall in Jerusalem. I was like, oh yeah, the minimal, yeah. It's lovely. Horrendously overpriced, right? It's a tourist trap. So you've been to Mamilla. Imagine Mamilla. Imagine, there's a viewpoint on top of Mamilla, and behind you are the gates of Shar Yafo, Jaffa Gate, and in front of you, you're looking down into a valley. Now, the Arabic name for that valley is the Silwan, okay? So we now call it the Silwan Valley. The end of that valley, you have the artist colony, where they have beautiful fairs and demonstrations every year. Very good. My wife would drag me every year. She's an artist. I am the worst person I know in the world at art, but I married an artist. She would drag me there. And yeah, she was it's lovely watching people doing things that you have no idea how to do. Beautiful. Just around the corner from them is what's called the Sultan's Pool. Now, the Sultan's Pool nowadays is an auditorium where you can listen to music concerts. And just behind that, 2,500 years ago, a man called Ben Hinnom, the son of Hinnom, scrimped and saved his whole life for a down in the times of the Second Temple, and he purchased that valley, and he was then who said to him, Mr. Hinnom, we hope you don't mind, but we need a place to burn that is pasul, that is invalid, because it's still kadosh, it's still holy. You can't just eat the animal. You're not allowed to. It's for Hashem. But you also can't offer it up on the mizbeach, the altar, because it's something wrong with it. Or the kohen did something wrong in his service with this particular sacrifice. So they would take it outside the old city, down the slope into the valley, to the valley of Mr. Ben, and they kept a large furnace burning 24/7. Okay, so there was always a fire burning in this valley, and from there he started referring to hell as Gehinnom, which is actually two words, Gay, the valley of Hinnom. So I feel sorry for the Hinnom. He thought buying himself Mamila Mall. He thought, I'm going to get Mamila Mall, right? With some restaurants and cafes and fashion shops. And all I got was a byword and a metaphor for hell, right? So the Gemara says what Moshe is asking for is for something that's metaphysical. The idea, I mean, we know there's an idea, we say, Kaddish, someone passes away. Moshe is saying the idea of hell that we usually understand is in the afterlife. It doesn't belong in this world. It's like heaven doesn't really belong in this world. Gan Eden doesn't really belong in this world. The Gemara says what Moshe is asking is for Hashem to make an exception and a new creation and bring the idea of Gehinnom to this world to these specific people. That's a powerful, that really is something that has never and will never exist again. I'd like to share one final approach. And this approach, I have to confess, I saw many, many years ago when I was studying not far from Gehinnom, as it happens, although in paradise in Jerusalem, in Yeshiva. I have since, and I put a message last night on the United Synagogue Rabbis WhatsApp group, and I regret to inform you that all I've received is either confusion or silence. No one knows where this idea is from, but I'm sure it exists out there. And it's a fascinating idea because it very elegantly answers why this specific punishment. And then the first question, it brings our attention in the same Mishnah after it's listed the list of 10 things created on that first Friday during twilight. It says a yesh omrim. There's another opinion that adds hamazikim. So before the tongs, mazikim, which are the spiritual. In English we'd call it demons, but it's quite a Christian translation of the word. It's not how we would translate it. Ukvurasu shel Moshe, ve'elo shel Avraham Avinu, and then another yesh omrim of the tongue. So some say, good. So it says evil spirits. It says and that Abraham used in place of Yitzchak at the Akedah, and in between those two is kavuraso shel Moshe, which means the burial place of Moshe. It goes as follows. I think we have enough time to run through it. Nowadays, Friday night, it's twilight. When is twilight halachic? Which is nearer the equator. Twilight begins when, halachically? It's why we light Shabbat candles early. Sunset, shkia. So shkia means has dipped below the horizon. So it varies depending on where you live. The gap in time between when the sun dips below the horizon and when three stars emerge, Seta Kochavim, which is, or as we say in Edgeware, Nacht. Yeah, Nacht. Sorry, I sometimes forget where I am. Nacht. Yeah, a good English word. The gap between sunset and Nacht is called Bein Hashmashot, twilight. We hold, follow this carefully. In halacha, we hold that is a safek yom, safek laila. We don't know if that time is day or night, which is why on Erev Shabbat, the absolute latest time in an emergency for a person to light Shabbos candles is at Shkia. You cannot light Shabbat candles. Nowadays is what, 9:27 or something absurd like that. Really late this time of year. You cannot light Shabbat candles after that, even though I've had this question from a number of congregants who've said, but Rabbi, I look out the window, it's clearly not nighttime, it's dark. And I've said to them, but it's clearly not daytime either, is it? Because the sun's gone. And therefore we're not sure. Is it Friday still? Is it Shabbos? And because it might be Shabbos already, you're not allowed to light Shabbos candles. We're really sorry. Just can't do it. and there's ways of fixing it next week. Okay? So we are of the opinion that twilight is what's called Safek Yom, Safek Laila. And so we treat it, because we're uncertain, we treat it stringently, as if it goes with the next day. So they asked this question, and it's amazing to see an approach that questions actions. One second. If twilight is observed stringently, and we assume that it has the status of Shabbos, how could the Almighty create any at that time? Here's all that. 10 things we say he created. Donkey's mouth, Miriam's well, the earth. So he didn't keep Shabbos. He didn't proclaim it. It's a fascinating approach that says if you want to find out how we should treat this period of time known as twilight, just read the Mishnah. It's clear from Hashem himself that we don't have to treat it like Shabbos because he created stuff during twilight on the first Friday. So go ahead, don't record this, don't do this. If you're running late, especially in the winter, your wife comes home or you come home and it's already 3:34, whatever. It's gone past Shkia because it's the middle of December. It's the winter solstice, and it's a very short day. Look at the Mishnah. It says, fine, I'm going to light a candle. What's the big deal? It's a brilliant question. Brilliant question. And they say the following approach, and we'll finish with this, of what is it that Moshe is doing and why is he asking for this? They say you're right. They say the 10 things that Hashem created during twilight were also brought into existence. We're going to get a little bit abstract for a second. They were brought into existence in a status of safek, doubt, meaning they only exist if at some point people need them to exist. Not like the trees, the plants, the animals, humans, the oceans, the stars. Yes. It's there and it's not there. It's only going to come into existence if at some point there is a need for it. So, for example, Miriam's not there the whole time. It only came into existence when there was a need for it. Bilam's talking donkeys the whole way through creation, and suddenly, no, only when Bilam refuses to listen, refuses to take the hint that his donkey's giving him, does the donkey turn around and say, "Come on, mate, this is ridiculous. Stop hitting me." I'm not. It's not me. Like, stop it. So it only comes into existence if there's a need for it. Now, last step. Last step. Moshe turns around and he says, "In Bria Yivra Hashem." He says, "I've got a challenge. I'm not doing this off my own accord. I'm not fabricating this. This isn't for my own aggrandizement. This isn't for my own celebrity. I'm doing this. I have to demonstrate I am totally selfless as it is. And there's nothing." He says, "I haven't taken a single donkey. There's nothing I've gained from this role." He says, "Trust me, if you have to deal with fetching Jews for 40 years, nothing I've gained at all. I've done this for Hashem. How do I demonstrate that to the nth degree, to the 100th percentile? How do I demonstrate that?" He says, "What I will do is I will bring into existence the Pi Haaretz, the thing that Hashem created, Schrodinger's mouth of first Friday. I will decide now that in my worldview, that period of time is not Kodesh, it's not Shabbos yet. I decide now, for me, Moshe, that is a weekday. It can be brought into existence. The problem with this is how he demonstrates his selflessness. The problem with this, in the same Mishnah, we read what else was created. Bein Hashmashot on that first Friday. What else was brought into existence? We just read it. But Yesh Omrim, there are those who add, Kavuraso Shel Moshe. So Moshe was conscious of the fact that if I decide that for me, that very first Friday twilight has the status of a weekday, and if I bring into existence the Pi Haaretz, the mouth of the earth, he says to himself, if I do that, I've also signed my own death sentence, death warrant. Not that we should speak such a way of Moshe. Because if I decide that twilight was a weekday, I've also brought into existence my own burial place. And so why is it he asked for this specific punishment? Because it's only through this specific punishment. Could be any other supernatural punishment. He asked for this because he understands and realizes the real challenge is I need to demonstrate I've gained nothing from this. My hands are clean, I'm totally selfless, and there is no greater way of demonstrating that than sacrificing his own to Kiddush Hashem, to sanctify Hashem's name, put an end to this particular rebellion. And that is the creation, as it were, the Bria that he wants to bring into existence. And that is why he asked specifically for this thing, this method of punishment, to be the one used. Thank you very much.
Very much for that. Very, very thanks for coming from Stanmore for this. I'll say goodbye to those on Zoom and then we will finish off the proceedings.